Where were we going with all of this?
I don't even know where we've been.
Oh, I know where we're going. We're going to court. We have found out a bunch more information about our favorite weasel that owes everybody money, Colin Thomson of Kast Media, K-A-S-T, for those of you looking it up. We've told the story of how he ripped us off on advertising, about how he's ripped off tons of people we've spoken to over the last week or two, and we've also heard news reports of other indiscretions of his, and now we find out that his own employees were the ones who thought of suing him before we even did. How do you even write this shit?
It has been a crazy week. I have had so much of my day every day filled up with phone calls and conversations with people. We said we weren't alone in this. We're not alone in this. And there's a lot of people owed a lot of money. There's a lot of people who didn't realize the severity of it because of how many people were involved. And this may end up being a lot bigger than people thought it was going to be. We spoke to numerous people this week, and I spoke to you earlier in the week, and I told you after I had spoken to 3 other creators. So 3 other people who have programming that was through Kast Media, along with us. And between our 4 parties, Kast Media owed $1 million. And that was just us 4. That's not even counting any of the gigantic shows. I mean, Logan Paul has been associated with Kast. At least in the past he was. Lots of other shows.
Sarah Silverman,
lots of other shows, lots of other names. We don't want to make any assumptions, but just from us 4, it's $1 million. So this may end up being quite significant.
Here's another thing. We haven't heard from anybody that's not mad at him. That he has paid all of their money and they are happy with their business dealings. We have heard nothing from any of those people. We solicit you if you exist. Come try to defend the weasel, but we're not hearing it so far.
No, it's people that are looking at different ways of getting restitution, but also at this point making sure this can't continue. I'm going to read in a little bit the original press release that Podcast One and Kast Media put out about their sale of certain assets. But as that press release we read on the Drive-Thru so perfectly put, and we don't even know who did it. Again, if you did that, please reach out to us. I'd love to know who put that out. We're all being, and again, we're out, but we were all being told that the money that you earned is not coming to you. The only chance you have of recouping any of it is by signing a deal with Podcast One, at which point you'll get some of your money, and then the rest of it, including stock, will be over 2 years.
Stock at a company that technically doesn't exist yet.
It's pre-IPO. The company has not been spun off. There is no stock yet. And that company that you're being told you will have stock in, which would be the company that would represent the hosting of your show, will have Colin Thomson involved with it. It's insane.
You're invited to work with the person that has screwed you out of money and derailed, in some cases, your podcast, and you are contractually obligated to, in some cases, thankfully not us, but these people are, and they can't get out of it because they can't even find this guy because he won't talk to anybody.
Well, no, that's not true. He'll talk to certain people. And, you know, we've been hearing a lot of things, and I want to be careful what we say here, but not everyone can't find him. So I don't think we should say that because that's not accurate.
Oh, some people can find him, just not the people that really want to.
We have not heard anything, and other parties who are waiting to hear something about settlements. We didn't expect it. Again, the lawyer said we were going to get it within 2 weeks, a month and a half ago, and we haven't had anything. But we haven't heard anything. Other people who are still waiting on it haven't heard anything. There are people who are trying to figure out a way to get into arbitration because some of the Kast contracts, for anyone who's still under Kast contract, typically they, if not exclusively, had a clause saying that any dispute would go to arbitration. There are people trying to force it. There are people who just want to sue Colin. And at this point, the biggest contingent, the growing contingent, are people who are about to press charges and about to talk to the attorney general and about to talk to as many district attorneys as we can, because this is insane. This is insane. And again, the involvement of Live One for no good reason in any of this is puzzling. and seems to be becoming a bigger and bigger story.
And why they're not running away from this guy. The more they hear about the more people he owes money, the more people he has misrepresented things to, the more people that he has led down the primrose path, they will not separate themselves from this guy or this deal with his moribund organization. And one has to question why that would be the case. Are they trying to take him under their wing and rehabilitate him from a life of crime?
You know, there are a lot of people scared. We spoke out and we heard from a ton of people thanking us and a ton of people with almost the exact same story. We have not heard from anyone who's ready to speak out publicly yet.
We heard from people who are trying to take care of relatives with medical issues with the money that they are owed from this guy because they had put work into their programs to where that they could have that income and take care of these people. And now they're sitting around with their dicks in their hands because of this guy and his $2 million house in California and his vacations flying around the world. And the reason why, by the way, besides the fact that we just like to talk about people that we're not happy with, the reason why we keep bringing this up is because what you said, a lot of people are still contractually obligated and or just scared to talk. And we can, and it's already made podcasting industry news, not related to wrestling podcasting, but podcasting in general. And it's probably going to make some bigger news when we all eventually discover why that Live One / Podcast One is so enamored of this guy and this deal that they're putting themselves in the middle of all of this. We still got to find that out. And that's going to make sense. So we're just trying to get ahead of all the news that's going to be made when this becomes a big thing that this shyster has created for himself in regular mainstream news is what we're doing.
There are two big things here. One is, what did Colin do with all the money and how much was there? At this point, based on everyone I've talked to, I haven't talked to anyone not owed money and not owed a lot of money. So how long was this going on? The other thing too is, typically when people steal millions of dollars, they don't do it alone. Typically there's someone involved. Typically there's someone helping. Typically there's someone advising. We will find out who that is. So I think the Colin end of it and the misappropriation of all of these shows' money is a big deal that will probably become a criminal deal. And I think the second question is, why the hell did a publicly traded company think it was a good idea to get involved with this guy and then continue to stay with this guy when, Jesus Christ, is it apparent that there's a major problem here? And they try to intimidate anyone from saying anything. You can't say anything. We expect you to hold confidentiality about all of this stuff.
Oh, remember the guy, the head, what's his name? Rob?
Rob Ellen.
When he emailed me, not even knowing who the fuck I was, and apparently he found out, but said, well, and the SEC doesn't take kindly to threats. Well, the Southeastern Conference is going to come down on these sumbitches one way or the other.
He said the SEC doesn't take kindly to these threats. The threat was, we're going to call the SEC.
And tell them what you're doing.
Yeah.
We have factual evidence to back up in your own emails.
That was the threat. We're going to call the SEC about all this. Let's take a step back. I know you want to talk about this class action lawsuit that we've now become privy to, and this is getting crazier and crazier. Let's go to the original press release about this purchase. May 23rd, 2023, 8:45 Eastern Time. This was put out. The source is Live One Incorporated. This is, I think, approximately, I got to check the emails, 2 weeks after I heard from Colin Thomson Kast Media, who owes us a lot of money. 2 weeks after I heard from him that this was what he was doing. He was selling his company, and that because of the sale, he'll then have money to pay us back all that we're owed, and then we can figure out things from there. But we'll be whole at that point. Here's the press release. Live One to acquire certain assets of Kast Media. And there's some bullet points here. Proposed deal expected to add $10 million plus in annual revenues. Acquisition would bring in-house IP development and ownership to Live One and its subsidiaries, and is expected to include more than 25 weekly podcasts and 33 million monthly downloads. Assets expected to include top Kast Media shows, Some more news. Brandon Schaub's Fighter and the Kid, The Opportunist, Lost in Panama, Vigilante, and Was It Real? And top-tier host talent, Ellen Marsh, Rabia Chaudhry. I don't know who these people are. I'm sorry if I'm getting these names wrong.
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I've never heard any of this shit.
Whitney Cummings.
Okay.
Peabody Award recipient Mariana Atencio. You may remember her from MSNBC. And Audrina Partridge. Live One combined podcast network distribution would rise to over 340 episodes weekly and nearly 750 million verified downloads annually. Once again, they're putting out this press release for the market. They're
saying that they are acquiring certain assets of a company that owes everyone money and is going to go bankrupt by the owner's own words and admission unless this deal goes through.
By the way, the owner's attorney wrote that to us, so we have that in writing. Yes. It's basically, take this bad deal with Podcast One, or he's going bankrupt and you get nothing. That's the threat.
They're awful happy about acquiring a company that's losing money hand over fist, leaking like a fucking sieve, aren't they? How does that work?
Because they're not losing money. Cast Media should be profitable. We just don't know where all the money went. That business, the business of selling advertising for podcasts, if you take yourself away from the production end of it, which they haven't, which is part of the reason why it's a badly run company, that end of it should be a very lucrative business. I mean, I say that knowing numbers. It should be a very lucrative business. If a doctor's office is busy and they're billing nonstop and getting paid nonstop and they're losing money, maybe the doctor's taking off with the money. I used to work for doctors when I was a kid, when I was like 20 years old, and I remember these billing problems. So there's that. But let's go to this press release.
So what you're saying is Live One shot a man while robbing his castle, but Colin Thomson took the money and ran.
I don't know, but let's go to this. Live One on NASDAQ as LVO announced today it has entered into a letter of intent.
And what is today, by the way? What's the date on that, just for people hearing it now?
May 23rd, 2023.
Okay.
Live One announced today it has entered into a letter of intent to acquire certain assets of the Los Angeles-based podcast network, development, and production company, Cast Media, in an all-stock deal. No cash. That's insane, especially if you have to hold that stock for at least 2 years. That's crazy. If completed, the proposed acquisition is expected to increase annual consolidated revenue for Live One by over $10 million. Here's a quote from Colin Thomson, founder and CEO of Cast Media, and executive producer of Cast's owned narrative IP slate. Our goal is to entertain, inform, and inspire through our shows. And Live One has the infrastructure, reach, and operational excellence to take that mission to the next level. Live One's commitment to our premium original podcasts will allow us to expand IP development and production, and production to increase our original owned content slate. We look forward to completing the deal and working shoulder to shoulder with the impressive team at Live One. Let me stop for a second.
You're usually shoulder to shoulder with somebody when you're handcuffed to them.
Let me just say something right there. That's the problem. I mean, there's a lot of problems here, but after all of this, we're being told, again, what he's saying here, Live One's commitment to our premium programming will allow us. I'm staying on board. I'll still be in charge. The guy who fucked around with everyone's money will be in charge of this if anyone feels forced into taking this awful deal just to try to get some of your money. How is this not completely... Every time I describe any angle of it, it's just so fucking illegal. How is any of this possible? Well, here's a quote from Live One CEO and Chairman Robert Ellen.
He's the one I wanted to hear from.
Live One has long admired Cast Media's roster of top-notch podcast programming, their host talent, and their development in IP. Through this collaboration with Colin and his team, we expect to deliver a slate of original programming with an eye towards second window TV. The letter of
what?
They want to take Colin's podcasts.
My TV doesn't have any windows in it. It doesn't even have a fucking door.
They want to develop television programming for Colin's podcast content, it sounds
He's
like.
got the perfect face for radio, though.
The letter of intent with Kast Media is non-binding, and the contemplated acquisition is subject to execution of definitive documentation with Kast Media, completion of due diligence, settlement of Kast Media's outstanding obligations, obtaining applicable approvals and consents, and other customary closing conditions.
How much due diligence do they need to do when you can Google this motherfucker and see what he's into?
There could be no assurance.
But you can Google them and see what they're into, though, too, can't you?
That's right. There could be no assurance that the proposed acquisition will be completed and or within the anticipated timeline. And then it goes into some biographical information about both companies.
Well, because that's the thing. If you Google Live One, Podcast One, it doesn't all come up sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and waterfalls, right? So maybe this is birds of feathers.
You know what? I don't want to reveal it because someone who I used to work with at Sony Music got in touch with me and they said, I heard who is involved in this whole thing. Welcome to Sleazetown. They have a reputation for not paying anyone. AEG, Live Nation, etc., etc. So we're being told, well, let's take a step back and lay it out again. We're being told in order to get the large amount of money they owe us, we have to sign an agreement with Podcast One, where we would not get all of our cash up front. We would get a third of it, and then a third, and it doesn't even specify cash in the original document. They said a third over 2 years. Loosely, it could be cash or whoever, and then a third in stock after 24 months. Couldn't do anything for 2 years. So it's not like, here's the value of what we owe you in stock. You could sell it tomorrow and get your money back. That's not what we're being offered.
No, here's stock in a company that doesn't exist yet, but might exist if all goes through, and then it'll be good in 2 years if the company's still around.
Here's stock in a company that's being spun off by a company that gives everyone stock instead of cash for every deal they do. No, thank you.
So,
No,
you're the big financial Wall Street high muckety muck grand poobah around here, Brian. Is there a way? I'm not saying they're doing it. I'm just saying, is there a way that the Live One and Podcast One people and Colin Thomson could all get together and make stock in this company that doesn't actually exist and then distribute it around and make some money themselves, despite the fact that the stock may or may not be worth a tinker's damn, as Mama Cornette used to say? Is there a way they could make money off that, just theoretically?
Yes.
High in the sky?
Yeah, the investors can lose money and the people running companies can make money. That happens all the time. Sure.
Even if the shit they're doing is absolutely worthless.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stock and worthless shit out there. Absolutely.
Well, and that may or may not, allegedly, theoretically, explain why that this company would continue to do business with a miscellaneous weasel that was trying to bring them a deal that would allow them to sell some fictitious stock and make some money somehow before anybody figured it out.
And once again, a reminder, Rob Ellen's involvement, the CEO of Live One, a publicly traded company, his involvement was to get copied on an email by Colin after his two top executives, I believe, in his Podcast One division were already copied for the entire chain. He got copied by Colin. Then he wrote to you and said, we have no dog in this fight. We don't want to be involved. Don't get us involved. However, talk to my team.
But yes, just talk to us.
Just every single time. We don't want any problem. Talk to my gut tells me you should talk to my team.
And in his second email, I had to ask you, I said, is this what is written by a person on experimental LSD type medication?
The exact words were, is this fucking guy on drugs?
Well, yeah. There were some English words sprinkled into the conversation, but anyway.
But you brought up strong-armed last time. That's what it is. We're being strong-armed. If we want to get any of the money that we earned that was paid for the work we did, we have to submit to these terms. It's insane.
To be perfectly fair, we don't know whether even those ridiculous terms are still a thing because we've heard nothing since we referred their attorney to our attorney. We've heard nothing from these people at all, and we only have to guess that that is their best offer because they haven't made another one. Probably because he doesn't have any money. Probably because they thought that this was all going to go by without anybody calling attention to them in public. And guess what? And they inflated the Kast media numbers with our show, even though we were an independent show and they were simply selling our advertising for a straight commission split. They had no other ownership and or rights to our program, but they were inflating their numbers with our show to try to con this Rob Ellen guy that they were bigger than their fucking britches indicated.
Don't assume they're trying to con Rob Ellen. That's an assumption we shouldn't make.
Well, we shouldn't make that because chances are the conner is in with the conee.
We don't know. But my point is we shouldn't make any assumptions because there's a lot of moving parts and more voices coming at it on that topic.
But their numbers were being inflated by our numbers. We can say that regardless of who the audience was. And while we do appreciate the fine comedic efforts of Whitney Cummings and Sarah Silverman and some of these other fine people that we're not familiar with, does anybody out there believe that anybody that we have just mentioned or any of their heralded programs have the audience that ours does? I think not. And that's probably why we got at least more of our money for a longer period of time than most people did, because he wanted to keep us happy as best he could until he decided to shove us up the old Hershey Highway. And so now that we are not in any way affiliated with his bogus company, his numbers don't look so good anymore. So they need to go back and they need to update some of those press releases and draw some other figures out of the fucking pit of their ass.
You know, another thing, Jim, is we've heard from, since the show dropped, the first show that we did about this, we've heard from a lot of former employees of Kast Media. And we've heard everything from thank you for saying this to go get him to thank God someone's saying these things finally. I said it in that email I wrote. I'm sure there's other people with similar stories. I will find them. Turns out there's a whole lot more than we thought. We thought it was just the content creators being ripped off and their managers and their agents. Turns out it's not. Turns out there's a lot of employees, even ones who left, I guess, without much of a issue, are still happy that someone is saying something about all this, which is very telling. And in the midst of hearing all of these things from a lot of people, and if you have anything to say, reach out. Brian at ArcadianVanguard.com or CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. We became privy to a class action lawsuit against Kast Media and Colin Thomson.
Yes, which predates him telling not only all the people he was dealing with, but his own employees that they were going to either be sold or go broke. His own employees have already entered into a class action lawsuit to sue this fucking guy. And this started when? Late last year? If I'm trying to find the date.
I believe he was served in August, or the summons is from August of 2022.
Can I read this list of charges? I've been waiting to do this.
I believe so, but due to the nature of this and the people that may be involved, we want to be careful what we say so it doesn't endanger anything about what they're doing.
What I'm basically saying, this is what this suit, the class action lawsuit filed against Kast Media, I guess Colin Thomson, but Kast Media is an entity.
No, Colin, it says in there
that... Is Colin Thomson named specifically?
It says in there that Kast Media is an alter ego of Colin Thomson.
Okay. Well, this is what a lot of people are saying. They're being charged in this class action lawsuit. Failed to provide required meal periods, failed to provide rest periods, failed to provide overtime wages, failed to pay minimum wages, failed to pay accrued but unused vacation wages, failed to pay all wages due to discharged and quitting employees, failed to promptly pay wages due, failed to maintain required records, failed to furnish accurate itemized wage statements, and failed to reimburse necessary business expenses. Sounds like a wonderful place to work. And a wonderful guy at the helm, and this is what his own employees have filed against him in a court of law that predates him screwing everybody out of money that he was working with in the podcasting world.
No, it predates him screwing us out of money. Don't make that assumption either.
That's true. He was already screwing other people out of money.
And again, we actually don't know for sure because, again, this isn't going to be over until we get the full accounting, until we really see what they billed and what they received before we got ours. This isn't over until then, so I'm not making any assumptions about when getting fucked out of money started. Because I don't think that's a smart thing to do right now.
But again, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned because we're the network news now, because this is going to end up, I predict, your boy, what's your boy's name? Farber over there on CNBC?
Faber, not Farber. David
Well,
Faber.
I predict that Farber is going to be reporting on this on network news when everybody from Colin Thomson to his alter ego Cast Media, Live One, Podcast One, and every other motherfucker named One gets hauled into goddamn court. We ought to put it on Judge Judy. She'd straighten it out.
Don't give me a break.
Anyway, that's the update on does Colin Thomson owe you money? And apparently the answer universally is fucking yes.
Universally. And if anyone has anything to say, again, if he owes you money, get in touch. We're doing our best to get everyone involved so that everyone can make sure that we're aware of what's going on. If you are owed money, get in touch. If you are a former Cast employee, get in touch. If you are someone that, independent of either of those things, has been ripped off by Colin Thomson, get in touch. New podcast coming soon.
And as well, we are trying to, as you mentioned, we're trying to spread the word with our pulpit here that we have, because other people are not so blessed and fortunate to be able to reach a lot of people. And that's why a lot of these smaller folks were in the dark about whatever was going on with Colin, as we were all starting to find out.
60-40. Can you imagine? 60? I can't get past that still. 60-40. Holy shit.
Hey, 40 for you and 60 for them. It's that standard industry.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We're assuming that it's 60 for the creator. Yeah. That's a bad assumption.